My name is Maya Benton. I'm an adjunct curator at the International Center of Photography in New York, and we're going to be talking today about the Roman Vishniac Retrospective, Roman Vishniac Rediscovered. Roman Vishniac is responsible for taking the most widely recognized, most widely reproduced photographic record of Jewish life in Eastern Europe between the two world wars. What's unknown is that his work actually spans the early 1920s into the late 1970s. And so this exhibition shows his iconic work and repositions it in a different context, but also really introduces a life's work, and I think makes the argument for him being one of the great photographers of the 20th century. Vishniac was born in 1897 in a town called Pavlovsk outside of St. Petersburg, and then he was raised in Moscow. And when he was 7 years old, he was given a camera and a microscope, and he became an avid amateur photographer. At the same time, he was an avid student of biology and chemistry and zoology. He arrived in Berlin with his new wife, Luta, who is a Latvian Jewish woman, in 1920. And he quickly joined amateur camera clubs and took to the street, documenting this cosmopolitan city and experimenting with modernism. And in one of the photos, you see a train station, and it looks like a Fritz Lang stage set. And you see the influence of this Weimar light and shadow play, and you see the strong angles, and you see the influence of the context in which he was becoming a professional photographer. In one photo, there's an image of the polar bears, the famous polar bears at the Berlin Zoo, but it looks like the people are behind bars. And this image is quite poignant because shortly after he took the image, Jews were prohibited from going to the Berlin Zoo. And shortly thereafter, Vishniac started to document the Nazi rise to power in Berlin. And this is a body of work, most of which has never been published. And it's an incredible documentation of how quickly things changed from this very open, intellectual, cosmopolitan Weimar society to one where militarism and fascism were closing in. Two images that were often reproduced and published are photos he took of his daughter, Mara, in 1933. In one, she's standing in front of a Nazi phrenology shop, advertising the superiority of the Aryan race and providing certificates that you could say, you know, I have an Aryan skull and I am indeed an Aryan. And in another, she's standing in front of a poster of Hindenburg and Hitler, and we managed to find the original poster. At the same time, he was documenting German Jewish relief organizations. After the rise to Nazi power, most Jews were prohibited from practicing professions, from teaching, from being doctors or lawyers. Their businesses were boycotted, and so middle-class German Jews were struggling to make a living, to find food. And so he took photos of middle-class soup kitchens, people trying to get emigration visas. And he also took photos of Zionist agrarian training camps. There's a great photo of a boy where he's learning how to milk a cow. There is no cow, so it's just this wooden table with the fake udders. These were urban kids from Berlin, and they were sent there to really learn how to become farmers, so that when they went to Palestine, if they were able to go, they would be prepared. One of the great discoveries is that even in this work that documents relief organizations, you see the great modernist impulse. There's an image of this egg drawer, and it looks like a surrealist image, and yet it's documenting an agrarian Zionist training camp outside of Berlin, and it shows his versatility, and it also shows his compositional acumen. Vishniac was sent in 1935 by the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which was the world's, and is still the world's largest Jewish relief organization, to take photos of poor, destitute Eastern Jews, so that those images could be used to show potential philanthropists in the West. And then the war hit, and this became the final photographic record of that world. One of the recurrent themes in Vishniac's iconic work of Eastern Europe is photos of children in basement dwellings. This is because one of the things that the JDC sponsored was summer camps for poor urban Jewish kids. And so he would take photos of kids living in these stifling basement dwellings with very little light and heat, hungry, poor children. And then those images would be used to raise money for these summer camps. Many of these images became quite reproduced. There's a photo of this girl named Sarah, and the image was reproduced on letterhead for an annual fundraising campaign in New York of the JDC. Very few of them were published, however. And so bringing together the known work and the unpublished work, I think, argues for him as a great modernist, and also helps us to understand the documentary assignment and what he was capturing, and to understand the context in which those images were used at the time that they were commissioned. Towards the end of his documentary assignment in Eastern Europe, Vishniac was hired by the Joint, or the JDC, to make films. Unfortunately, the films he made, and he made 2 of them, were destroyed. But what we've been able to do is slowly piece together outtakes, which were what wound up on the cutting room floor, show these iconic images coming to life. And so we've pieced them together, and we're showing them here for the first time. And in some cases, it's the only known moving footage of these remote Carpathian communities, living in very rural outposts that, hadn't been touched by modernity in 400 years. I think for those who are really familiar with Vishniac's iconic work, they're going to be surprised to see 50 years of work ending with his scientific photomicroscopy. We have a room that's showing his color slides and his microscope and photos of him working in his scientific laboratories, which most people have never seen before. And I think that for young people who've never heard of Vishniac, they're going to walk away with the sense that they are now familiar with one of the great photographers of the 20th century.